to the Jesse Jameson, I think it is called, bar here in Jamaica Plain today because I was invited by Balaj, our friend Balaj, to meet him there because he was meeting a friend there.
Yeah.
And I went and had some non-alcoholic beers in the middle of the day at 1 o'clock. It was a nice reason to get away from my work for a little bit and have an actual lunch break. And I asked Balaj about our friend
WTF Bellatar.
Bellatar. And you know how it is, like, you're from Utah. I know somebody in Utah. He had never seen any of Bellatar's films. Yes, that's right. Yeah, he had no opinion on Bellatar. He was like, "Oh, wow, that sounds really boring." And then so we talked about Magyar a little bit because he does know something about that. But Bellatar, no opinion. His friend, however,
yeah. Go ahead. His friend
had read the book that Satan Tango was based on, but had not seen the movie Satan Tango, which is the 8-hour long.
Yeah, which sounds like an 8-hour Werkmeister harmonies.
Yes.
Like a town just disintegrates or something. Well, that's what all the movies are about. It's like people basically turn into animals and kill each other. Huh.
Well, you know, are we sure? And we only saw 2 of his films.
Well, he only made like 8 or something.
Yeah, well, I understand why.
It's so easy to be dismissive of these people who put their hearts and souls into these things.
Yeah.
But I would love if Balaj is willing to take the beating. I'd be absolutely fascinated if he would watch Werkmeister. I would not ask anybody to watch Turin Horse. But right. I'd ask him to watch Werkmeister and say, okay, are we missing something? Is it like a Hungarian thing and you wouldn't that's what I'm gonna get a t-shirt in Magyar.
Is it a Hungarian thing?
It's a Hungarian thing. You wouldn't understand.
You wouldn't understand. I think that
Bellatar.
Right, exactly. And I think that is the thing with Werkmeister is that you get the sense that there's a linguistic, there's a cultural barrier there that's hard for us to cross.
It's about I think a lot of it has to do with the Iron Curtain. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I think we talked about this last time. I think there's a big discussion about where is God? When you're ruled by a society that is at heart atheistic, such as communist Russia, where is God? And where are we if there is no God?
And there's a desire for God. That's the thing that I hadn't really anticipated, because you had pointed out, when we talked about the other 2 Iron Curtain films, Solaris and Stalker, they're deeply religious films.
They are. I think they are.
Irreligious country. They're, something that is is literally or was forbidden.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think it'd be really cool. I'd buy him a beer. Well, I'd have to probably buy him a lot of beer.
Well, and actually, he said, I'd like to watch it with you. I'd like to watch a Bellatar film with you. So that may actually happen.
Oh, yeah. I think it'd be wonderful. Just bring a lot of booze.
Yeah,
but you're not okay.
Well, I might have a cocktail tonight. I have some very good whiskey up in the cabinet.
There we go.
I dip into very occasionally. But I try to keep it to 1 a week.
But you've earned it.
But
you're worth it.
It's the road to ruin. That is the first step.
I'm your co-enabler.
That's right. You deserve it.
It's fascinating. I was reading this obituary of this guy. I forget who he was, but he was supposedly, according to the New York Times, he was a well-respected scientist, but I'd never heard of the guy. But supposedly he was kind of a mess and kind of a rebel and pissed a lot of people off and knew it. It was kind of apologetic about it. And at the end of his obituary, they had this one quote, which I thought was great. He says, "There's this one voice in my mind that says, you've done this 9,999 times before, and it's always ended badly." And he says, that voice is very convincing. But then there's that other voice that says, this time it will be different. Yeah. Tell it, baby. Amen. Tell it.
Put that on my tombstone.
Yeah, this time it'll be different. Anyway,
I'll show them. I'll show them all.
How
they
hard can it
laughed at
be?
me.
Yeah.
How hard?
That's the other famous tombstone thing.
How hard can it be?
How hard can it be? Yeah. Can't be that hard, right? Yeah, it can.
I think I've stepped out for a moment. But if you'd like to leave a message.
Okay. Christ before Jesus or Jesus before Christ?
Christ before Jesus, you tackled it, my friend.
Well, I sort of speed ran it a bit. The problem is,
let me bring up the page.
What?
I just want to bring up the page because
let's get the facts on the table here.
I want to get the facts on what the heck is this book. This is not a mainstream book.
Nope, well, it's $2.99 on Amazon. So yeah, that alone tells you it's not exactly E.L. Doctorow or J.K.
Well,
Rowling.
yeah, I mean the ebook is incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
It does get him a lot of readers, though.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a very, I don't know what you call it, fervent following.
Don't they all?
Yeah. And boy, his website is terrible.
Call him up. Say, hey, look.
I will, I swear. All right, so the person that I've engaged with is a guy named Jaron Wingo. Maybe I can convince him to come on the pod if we think it's like it would be fun. And his co-author is Matthew Britt. And so these are not theologians. I think, first of all, we should say they're not theologians and they're not historians, although they really are historians at this point because other historians are talking to them, but they don't have degrees, in that field. Jaron Wingo is an economist and a data scientist, and Matthew Britt is a student of philosophy, let's say, and data scientist. But what they've managed to do with this book, I think, is kind of remarkable, given their, let's say, low credentials in the field, is that they've actually come up with a very credible model for mythicism. And I was not even aware before, but mythicism before was always focused on these kind of...
Explain to our listener what mythicism is.
So mythicism, I don't know why it's being used this way, but that word refers to the stance that not only was Jesus Christ not a supernatural being, but that Jesus Christ did not in fact exist, and that
as a living person,
that it is a mythology of a non-existent person, like a character in a play or a character in a novel. It's a highly controversial thing to say, and also very offensive to a lot of people, but I find such a bold stance to be fascinating. And one can say the same about Socrates. One can say the same about the Buddha. One might make the claim about Socrates, and you might argue that, Socrates actually is referred to by other people than Plato. So there seems to be some historicity to Socrates, whereas there doesn't seem to be the same historicity with the figure of Jesus, nor with the figure of Paul in the Bible.
Or anybody else. I mean, I think they call into question whether Luke wrote Luke, or Matthew wrote Matthew, or Mark wrote Mark. They call into question all that, because basically if I can boil it down, they basically say that virtually all the Gospels, everything in the New Testament, was written basically 130 AD to 200 AD. So everything's being written everything's being written at least 100 years after supposedly Jesus died on the cross. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but
there's a lot of information.
there's a lot of information there. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not familiar with, I mean, I know some stuff from the New Testament, but I don't know Colossians versus Galatians versus the Acts of the Apostles versus Hebrews. I just don't know any of that stuff. But to a certain degree, you don't really need to, because it's the actual meaning of the words within those books is not important to their argument. Their argument, as you can probably sum up too, their argument is that, I mean, the core to me, it seems like the heart of the book is chapters 7 and 8, which is a stylometric analysis, where they basically fed the Greek version of the New Testament, which I believe is the oldest version we have.
That it's written in Greek,
it's written in Greek.
It's not written in Hebrew or Aramaic.
Right.
It's written in,
and
Greek.
They shoved it through a computer program. Stylo is the name of the computer program. And what Stylo does is it can determine, it analyzes text and offers insights or offers statistics about what it thinks, how closely related this text is to another text. Like you can feed it 2 texts, feed it a bunch of texts, and it'll show you the distance between various texts and show you distances between different chunks of the same text against each other. And so one of the things they say is that it's pretty clear, according to their analysis, according to their what they've put forward, that a lot of the Gospels are composites. They're patchworks. They have different chunks that were written by different people. Because style is, they put forth that style is very convincing. And so, to a certain degree, you don't really need to know what is being discussed in Galatians at all.
No.
Because all they're saying is that, they say there's no Paul.
That's right. I mean, I found all of this earth-shaking. I also want to refine what I said earlier. It's not that they're saying that Jesus didn't exist. They're saying there is no historical evidence for the real living person that was Jesus. Paul, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, any of them, James. But these are, as far as they can tell, they're fan fiction written after something called The Gospel by Marcion.
Evangelion.
Evangelion.
Right.
Which is, what is the word in the Catholic Church? It is, it's an apocryphal text. Is that right? It's omitted, right? It's considered not
part of the canon.
Part of the canon.
Not part of the canon.
And it was rejected early on, like it was rejected shortly after it was written. And
because this guy Marcion, or I think it's Marcion, who lives around who's extend around 120 AD or 130 AD. I think he's from Turkey, and he's a wealthy ship owner, and he converts to Christianity, and he migrates to Rome, and he donates a lot of money to the Christian church. He converts to Christianity, donates a lot of money to the church in Rome. And then they get pissed off at him, or he gets pissed off at them, or both. And there's a schism. But, what they're implying is, I mean, I'm really mangling this a lot. And I really don't want to do that. But
it's also more.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's more complicated than that, because it's not clear that there's Christianity in Rome. There is something else called the Christians who existed prior to the turn of the epoch, and so therefore prior to the character of Jesus, and those get conflated in the 3rd and 4th century with Christians. So he's presenting a story about a
Marcion,
god.
You mean?
Marcion is, and I think it is referred to. Jaron refers to him as Marcion.
Okay,
but I don't know why the soft C, because in Latin it would be a hard C. So
it'd be a
Marcion,
hard C, right? But he's Little Mark. That's what it means.
which is also what Paul means. Paul in Latin, there was no name Paul. It was the small
nice guy.
one is what Paul meant. So that's where they start to say, well,
Tiny.
that's
hey,
odd.
Tiny, come here.
A couple of small guys, you know.
Yeah.
So he presents this gospel about a new God, the unnamed God, that is defeating or is replacing the demiurge, who is the God of the Old Testament.
God of the Jews, right.
The God of the Jews is being replaced by the unnamed God who sends down Jesus, not through birth, but just out of the sky.
He just descends upon Capernaum. He descends because one of the key things they do in one of their chapters is they try to get to the heart of Mark. They believe that Mark is based upon something called Proto-Mark, which they believe is really one of the earliest texts written. And they try to go ahead.
No. So before you go too far into that, I talked to Jaron recently and I said, where did you find Proto-Mark? And he says, since we wrote the book, we've given up on this idea of Proto-Mark. We think it's all Markian. We don't think that there was a Proto-Mark.
Yep.
In the book, they are trying to find out where did Markian start writing from. And as far as they can tell from the data and stylometry, he made it up completely out of nothing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the other thing that they emphasize a lot in all their discussion is that there's this endless recycling, as is the case with any literature. There's this endless recycling of previous tropes and themes and ideas and concepts and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, the Old Testament has a huge amount, the huge amount to play in this whole thing, and so it's again, you recycle stuff, but I mean, this was not news to me, because, well, I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble.
You don't have to go in.
Well, if you open the book and you start reading, it's like, hold a second, wait, back on page 443. This is like Prince Valiant. What happened in episode 197? And
right, so the continuity, right? You're reading it like a science fiction.
Well,
you're
even more than
continuities
that,
are all wrong, man.
I just find it's really hard to make sense. Like they quote in the book, they talk about the parable of the sower, right? Mm-hmm. And they compare the parable of the sower from two different books in the Bible. And
it's like Matthew and Luke or something.
I don't know. I'm not a scholar, but it's just like, even before you get to the comparison, it's like, wait, what's going on here? It's like, okay, yeah, I get it's like seeds, and there's like a thorn bush, and there's like a road, and there's a guy, and there's a metaphor. And then because this sort of rattled around my head when I was thinking about doing this episode with you, is that in one of my in a fit of absence of mind, I actually did go to a church for a while. I actually attended, and I actually went to some of the classes. They had classes for adults to explain this, and this was the Episcopalian church, and I went there. And I attended one service where the sermon was about the parable. I forget whether it was the prodigal son or the parable of the talents. Okay, but they're both very famous, and they're both fairly clear. And the preacher, reverend, vicar, whatever the name of the person is, gets up there and gives an explanation of it. I'm like, wait, were we reading the same story? Because I didn't get that at all. And I'm listening to him, I'm like, yeah, he's talking about the parable of like the 3 talents, or the parable of the prodigal son. And he says, and it means this. I'm like, you're nuts. It doesn't mean that at all. Just read it. Just look at the words on the page. It doesn't say anything at all like that. Oh, well, it's a very subtle metaphor. It's like, okay, guys, really, really.
You're treading dangerous waters there, right?
I am trading, but I'm not the first, and I'm not the last, and I'm not alone. Everybody has their story. Everybody knows that kid in Sunday school says, well, why did God allow, the animals to drown or something? It's just, this is not a revelation. Yeah, this is not a revelation. But even before you get to somebody interpreting the text for you, even the task of reading some of these texts, you're like, okay, what's going on here? Like, what's happening here? Because the wording is so odd, and what they point out, you're getting something that's been translated, reinterpreted, cut and pasted, and glued together 15 times. And as he says, there is this concept, like you mentioned, there's this concept of crest, CHREST,
right,
which means the good, the righteous. Mm-hmm. And then there is Christ, which is the anointed. It's the chrism. It means the person who has been anointed. Literally, yes. That's what a chrism is when they baptized you and stuff like that. And it's, changes are made all over the place. They talk about, and things that are done as wordplay are corrected by later people. Oh, he couldn't have meant that. That's stupid. He must have meant this other word that has an I instead of an E. It's like, no, that's the whole point. He was doing some wordplay there. Well, forget that. That's gone now because some guy in like 452 decided to cross that one out. And we're not talking about a lot of books here. We're not talking about, this is pre-printing press. So there's not a lot of copies.
And we're really, this only focuses on the New Testament, right? So Jaron and I've already forgotten his name, Jaron and Matthew are really laser focused on the Gospels and Paul.
New Testament.
They don't go into what's in the Old Testament. So
they do a little bit.
Okay, I missed that then.
Oh, they do. When they talk about the Old Testament, is they dip their toe into that water, which is,
like
by the way, the Old Testament
and the prophecies.
Well, no, they just talk about the Old Testament. When was the Old Testament written? And they said the earliest versions of the Old Testament, blah, 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 blah. And they say basically it's really the Old Testament you have today is Judaism with a huge influence of Hellenic culture, of Greek culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's like chapter 8 or chapter 9. They dip their toe in that water. So
I must have been exhausted at that point because
they're poking
so much
that
data.
bear. They're poking that bear too at the same time. But and yes, it's a very it arouses it's a very tender subject. Yeah. But I think there's some things that can as we were talking about before this episode. There's a general agreement that the Testaments are a text. They were written by human beings. They are not literally the word of, well, I'm sure some people say it's the word of God, but generally people don't consider the Bible as literally the word of God, like the words that came out of God's mouth. They are things that were written down by men and thoughts.
Well, here's what I know from Joshua Bowen, who's a biblical scholar who teaches courses in Hebrew. There are a couple of rabbis that I've been in contact with, and then I haven't actually talked to, but I do watch a lot of the videos by Dan McClellan, and people can think what they want of him. But he certainly understands the Bible. He understands the text really well. It was not in contention that the Gospels are written decades after the character of Jesus perished or died.
Right.
The time frame is different in the book that Jaron and Matthew have written. Generally, people think that it's like 3 to 4 decades after the first, or that Paul starts writing in just a decade after Jesus' death or something like that. And And it's also in agreement that the names on the Gospels are not the names of the people who wrote them, were not the people who actually were there with Jesus, and are not firsthand testimony. So that's all agreed by biblical scholars. What Jaron and Matthew are saying is, no, it wasn't a few decades later. It was,
They're saying two things. One,
and
they're written
and
much
two
later.
Major things, right? Yeah.
And B, they were not written by a single person.
That's right. They're a compilation of other writings. Yeah.
Compilation
multiple people.
A compilation is a polite word. They're serious cut and paste. Like they've found that like individual paragraphs come from completely different sources. It's like there's serious cutting. There's serious editing going on, not just like although
it's not in the book, the oldest of those is Marcion Evangelion. In the book, they say they were looking for a proto Marcion, but since the writing of the book, they've decided that it doesn't exist. There's no evidence for that at all. That it begins with Marcion. Marcion is rejected. Followers of Marcion and Marcion start to write the letters of Paul, and then the Gospels also start getting written after that. I guess Luke comes next. I don't know where Mark and Luke are, but they're basically pieces of Evangelion, and then other details filled in, and the story changes until you get to John. And John is, as far as I can tell, written around the end of the 2nd century.
Yeah, it's
because of the anachronisms in John.
It's widely considered to be the last thing written, and it's a really different piece of work. It really is. Like there's a completely different focus in John. I mean, it has the whole end of the world, the apocrypha, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably mangling this, but it's a different thing altogether, because the original Gospels are very concerned with the life of Jesus, his birth, his ministry, his death, his resurrection. John goes a lot farther than that, and his stuff is really, and the language of John is much different. But the key thing is that what these two authors are really highlighting is, one, it happened a lot. It was written a lot later than you think it was written.
A lot later.
Which is like, okay, that kind of sucks. But to me, the much more significant thing is that these are just pastiches. These are like heavily inter-edited, stuff ripped out, stuff inserted in it by a whole cast of characters. Who knows who they are? And it's like, okay.
The term that gets passed around in the live discussion is fan fiction. Which all right.
It's sort of baiting people.
Yeah.
It's kind of baiting people. I want to be, and again, the question to be asked is, so what? If they reveal a truth, and if they've endured for this long, and if they have provided solace and comfort to millions over the centuries, who cares?
Well, I think some people would care.
Some people would, but I think a lot of people would not. And I might be one of the people who didn't care, because to me, everything's made up. Everything is a pastiche. Everything, people get overly concerned about authenticity. That's a long road to hoe. But maybe you just take a text the way it is, and maybe it was edited for a reason, and maybe it reveals a deeper truth, and maybe it's not that important. Maybe what matters is your belief, and your commitment, and things like that. I mean, I really do. I do maintain a certain distance from the whole thing. So I don't think I don't think it renders them null and void. I think it's just simply, if you're obsessed with the historicity of the Gospels, you've got a heavy lift ahead of you. But if you say, look, I just believe, because I think they are documents of truth, and they are documents of my faith. I was thinking about something else Sorry, I'm ranting a bit, but
no, you go.
I was thinking about something else, which was, for about 15 minutes a couple of years ago, I was really interested in kosher. Like kosher. Why? And of course, you hear the usual thing is, oh, it's all hygiene. It's about, purity of the food source, and it's a great idea, and it allows people to, they practice hygiene long before us. I was like, is that true? Really? And so I looked up kosher, and I found this one website by this guy, the number one hit. And it seemed like it was really geared towards, he wasn't out there. He was just trying to explain kosher in a very level-headed way. And he said, of course, the first question everybody asks us is, why do Jews practice kosher? And I loved his first answer. He says, answer number one, he says, because that's what you do when you're a Jew. And that's all the answer you need. And I'm like, right on.
That would be a great song for a musical.
Right on. It's just like, that's what it is. Everybody wants an explanation. Everybody wants a scientific explanation. Everybody wants a rational explanation. Everybody wants a provenance. Everybody wants a YouTube video explaining how it all works. It doesn't work that way for some people. This is just what you do, and that's it.
It's like
defines your faith.
Seth Godin sums it up really nicely. He says, people like us do things like this.
Yes.
That's his definition of culture. People like us do things like this.
Yep.
It's one. I mean, he's not 100% on for everything he says, but that phrase is I continue to think about.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, there's a higher level of discourse above this entire thing, which is the eternal discussion, the eternal exhausting and annoying discussion of like religion versus science. Well, they're both belief systems, and I always liked, his name will come to me in a few seconds, the guy who wrote Awakenings, Gould.
Carl Sagan or no. Oh, Awakenings. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah,
yeah, no, not Oliver Sacks.
Doctor.
It's. I think it's
Oliver Sacks is the actor.
No. Oliver Sacks is not an actor. Oliver Sacks was the guy who wrote The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
And so it's a different.
Very similar, but this is the guy, very famous biologist who wrote lots of books about Darwinism and stuff like that, and was a Red Sox fan and all that kind of stuff like that. His name will come to me in a few seconds. But he said, look, science and religion are non-overlapping magisteria. That's all there is to it. They're just two ways of looking at the world and two ways of interpreting and operating within the world. Because, if you pump me full of a couple of beers, and science, it's a belief system. You believe in the supremacy of direct observation, and to us, with our minds today,
and testing,
it's self-obvious. To our minds, it's like it's obvious. But there's people who say that. But then there's belief, which is, look, I believe in this, and I believe there's a higher truth that's more than science. Other people just believe in something because that's what they were brought up to believe, and it's what they feel comfortable with. But at some point, there's really a discussion. It's really an argument about, are you going to rationally analyze this thing, or are you just going to leave it alone?
So I think I heard somebody sum up the real difference between science and religion really well and simply. And it is simply that, let me give the way she said this. She said a lot of religious people think that it's a gotcha for scientists to say, what if you found out that everything you thought about gravity is wrong? And the scientist who was responding to this said, we would be thrilled that we're not looking for things to prove that we're right. We're looking for new things that we can find out that we thought were true that aren't true.
Right. There's a famous line.
But that's the major difference between science and religion.
Yes, because with religion, you believe it in spite of any empirical evidence. There is no refutation of it. There is no way you can refute religion, a religious belief. It is absolute and sufficient unto itself, whereas science is different. But science, there is an absolute belief in science, which is that we believe in the supremacy of empirical observation. But it gets a little tricky at that point. But yeah, the whole foundation of science is that it's refutable. Refutation is the foundation. Well, it's one of the foundations of science.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that we can be proven. Yeah, as one scientist I was listening to said, he says the greatest statement in science is, "Huh, I didn't expect that one."
Right, exactly.
That's interesting. Where'd that come from? He said that's science.
That's the Nobel Prize in the works, right? I mean,
right.
You're not going to get the Nobel Prize for saying, yeah, everything Einstein said was right. You're going to get the Nobel Prize for saying, no, this is something he got wrong. Mm-hmm. The universe doesn't work the way that he said.
But they're non-overlapping.
And this is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it's a whole other conversation, and one that's been done far better than we'll ever do. But
that's where you're right. Like, the work that Matthew and Jaron are doing here is data science, right? On these scriptures. And they didn't start out with a presupposition of trying to, show that Marcion is the first gospel from which all the other gospels spring. That's what they discovered through stylometry, and looking at the accounts of the historians at the time that also supposedly purported to show that Jesus was a real person. And we haven't touched on Josephus and Tacitus and Pliny the Younger and these other historical accounts, but they do go into that pretty in depth.
Mm-hmm. They do. And there's problems. There's issues.
There's
real issues. But the interesting thing, but one way of short-circuiting the entire conversation is that, well, yeah, okay, but still, it has survived and prospered for more than 1,000 years. That to me is the interesting thing. Like, why has that
millennia?
Happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
how? Well, I mean, it happened. Certainly not by accident. What?
Well, it's not unique. I mean, Buddhism still roams the world. Islam is a little younger than Christianity, but it's been around a long time too. And Islam is going gangbusters. So is Christianity. Buddhism is still, I don't know what the official body count on Buddhism is, but it's and there's a whole bunch of other stuff.
It's small. Yeah.
Is it?
Well, and Mormonism. I mean, that's an interesting one. I think that is what they're tackling next. Hopefully they'll survive. But yeah, Mormonism, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
right,
is a newer testament. And, likely does have one author. And that's, that has millions of people.
Right.
And huge temples.
Yeah. And so that's, to me, is the fascinating question. I mean, yeah, it's we could go on forever.
Why don't we have a template of Hercules? I mean, we don't have religions based on the Greek gods anymore. We don't have religions as, dominant religions based on the Egyptian
gods. That's the huge question. That to me is the only interesting, because the whole point about, to me, to a certain degree, it's like, okay, the Gospel of Luke was written by Luke and was written by a whole different bunch of people. I'm like, okay, great. But if you say to me, okay, we have a theory about why Christianity vanquished the Roman Empire, that's far more interesting to me. That is truly interesting, because
they don't get into that. Yeah.
Right. And I don't get that. Unless, of course, you take, like I try to do, I take the zero argument, which is that, well, it's the will of God. That's just what Jews do. They do kosher, okay? Any questions?
Yeah.
And so, but I don't like, but that argument doesn't only takes you so far. I mean, that argument is the argument of faith, but it doesn't satisfy my brain, which is a more analytical brain, which is, man, oh man, this is pretty intense. When you have really a very niche belief system, a very niche group of believers who are initially persecuted by the empire, a huge empire. I mean, seriously big empire. And within like 100 years, they are the official religion of the Roman Empire. Dude, what happened?
Well, right. And it's even weirder when you read Christ Before Jesus, because so apparently the Christians were the group responsible for burning down Rome, or they were the group that was blamed. It was not the Christians; it was the Christians.
But you hate when that happens. So one letter off,
one letter, and that's also shown in Tacitus, where you can literally see in the manuscript where they changed one letter,
right?
And wrote in the margins, but so there is like a political movement moving against Rome of another religious group called Christians that ends up being like, once the church gets established, it's like, yeah, that was us. But what's so strange is that it's not that Rome was destroyed by Christianity. Rome was transformed by Christianity. Rome still exists, right? It's the Vatican. It's still the same, it's the same group.
Right.
But, and it did exist for a long time in Constantinople. But this story, according to these two data scientists, really begins with like a con artist in the Levant and a guy from who is also from the same place as Marcion, who I forget his name, but that's the character that I find most fascinating.
What, Peregrinus?
Oh yes, Peregrinus. He has two names.
Yeah, it's Peregrinus Bombastus or something like that. I forget his name.
He's right, and scoundrel,
they think that and then they say he's Ignatius. Like there's this other character, another church father called Ignatius, and they said no, it's this Peregrinus guy. Ignatius just means the fiery one, and that was his nickname.
He just soaks everybody for all their money and writes a bunch of religious texts, and then gets run out of town. And I think they hang him up by his toes eventually. But there's that guy, and then there's Marcion, who's kind of run out of Rome after coming down from Turkey.
Yeah, but I mean,
and there's some connection with Serapis, which is this other god, that's sort of Christ-like, that is really big in the there was no Turkey at the time, but it's that area, really big in Egypt, and traveled down from Turkey to Egypt. And the father of Marcion was a high priest of the Serapis cult, and that somehow that all comes together into the set of Gospels, the character of Jesus, the writings of Paul. And it becomes the religion of Rome, of the largest empire around. And the Roman gods dissolve.
Well, to quote myself, and I think this point's been made by a lot of people before, is some of the greatest works, some of the most convincing things that humans have done have been fabulous syntheses. It's when somebody, as Steely Dan said, you crossed a diamond with the pearl and then you turned it on the world. Somebody takes something from way over to the left and they take something from way over the right and they unite it, and it works. And then they unleash it on the world because it connects things together for people. The story of Jesus is, to me, the story of Socrates. He's a celibate man, itinerant. He speaks in riddles. He has a small circle of male friends that he questions and interrogates and challenges with puzzles and words. And then he is charged with the state by a crime and willingly goes to his death. Remind you of anybody?
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
everybody in the Roman Empire, the key thing in the Roman Empire at that time is that all the intellectuals, anybody above all the top layers of society, they spoke Greek. The Romans regarded Greece like we regard, until recently, we regard England. Like, we're all very proud that we watch Masterpiece Theater and Downton Abbey, and we watch Monty Python. And to us, the British with their Shakespeare plays and their great novels and wonderful movies,
detective stories, yes.
and their detective stories, and their rousings, but fundamentally, the British are just more cultured than we are. And we look to Britain for things, a British accent is the mark of culture, is the universal mark of culture in America. Oh, they're speaking and stuff like that. And that was the relationship of Rome to Greece, which is that all the top people spoke Greek. When Caesar was stabbed, he didn't say et tu Brute, he said et tu technoi, they spoke Greek. And there's and people went to Athens and Romans went to Greece to be educated in the classics of Greek literature. Everybody knew the Iliad. Everybody knew about Socrates. So you have that. So you take that Socrates thing and you bolt it onto Judaism, which is the Old Testament. You take that and you take elements of that and you push them all together. Now you got this new amalgam. Or B, it's the word of God. That's why. Right. Lionel's just full of shit. It's just the truth. So get over it, dude. That's story number 2.
It does refute this idea that early Christianity was spread by Essene Jews. There is the element of the Bar Kokhba revolt that does correspond with the beginning of the Marcion. But a lot of that, I think that Jaron would say that they bolted it onto the stories in the Old Testament for depth that Marcion did, his was a counterpoint God to an existing God.
Well, the God of the Old Testament is a very scary guy.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before,
he's not friendly.
There's a really good book by a guy called Jack Miles called God, a Biography.
Yes, I've been meaning to read that one.
It's a good book. I mean, what I remember about it is he said the key elements of God, a Biography is he says, look, in the way that the books of the Old Testament are sequenced are not the way they are originally sequenced. He said they were sequenced differently originally. And if you look at the original,
in the Torah, they're different. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, if you
in
look
the Torah,
at the
they're different than what we call the Old Testament. Yeah.
He says you see a clear progression where God is, in Genesis and Exodus, God is massively involved with human affairs, and God appears to multiple human beings and is, he wipes mankind out in the flood, and he talks to Adam and he talks to everybody. And then he gradually, he disappears from the world. And the last time he appears is in that book of the Old Testament that everybody loves, which is the book which I think is really worth reading, which is the book of Job.
Yes.
Which is a truly...
so that is a later book in the Torah, in the original collection.
According to Jack Miles, Job is the last time that God talks to man, ever. And after that, God never appears. God's gone after Job.
Huh.
In the Bible. God, a Biography, the book by Jack Miles, he says, how do we... let's interpret the Bible let's view the Bible in terms of its main character, God. And what does the Bible reveal about the personality of God? And the answer is, it's pretty scary. The reason, it's very clear in the Old Testament, the reason why God brought the flood, he literally says, I regret that I made mankind.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Can you sugarcoat that a little bit for us before you wipe everybody out on the planet? No. I regret that I made them. And so that's a hard God to deal with.
Well, this is why Marcion, I think, is writing Yahweh as a demiurge, an evil deity. An evil deity, a demiurge. So that's a really different way of looking at things. And it's not the way things end up in the final story, right? It really is a different story.
It's
What's
always
strange
changing.
then is that it gets reassembled into a God of love.
Right.
And forgiveness.
But it's the same God as the Old Testament, is how it was taught to me.
They're unified. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same God. He became really nice. He just he went to therapy, and he's like, okay, I'm going to send my son down, and I'm going to cleanse mankind of its sins and offer hope and redemption. Yeah. I mean, parts of it are a beautiful message. I mean, it is a great message. It is a great message in a lot of ways. But to me, it's more interesting. Like, okay, so this became
right.
Like, why not Serapis? Why not Manichaeanism? Why not Zoroastrianism? Why not the one I just spent 15 hours on YouTube watching about, the cult of, I forget now, but it's the cult that was believed in by all the soldiers in the Roman Empire. Yeah, it'll come to me. It's all
not Mars, not the cult of Mars.
Not. It's the guy who's holding
figures.
No, it's the guy holding the head of the bull. It's like that's the key element. He's slaying a bull, and he's holding the head of the bull. And the name will come to me at some point. But all they know from it is destroyed temples. But yeah, why? This is the question of history in general. Why this? I mean, it's not just religion.
You're right, though.
Everything. Why Europe? Until like 1300, Europe was a joke. I mean, honestly, world civilization is basically China's kicking ass for like 5,000 years until about 1200. And then the wheels come off the wagon for China for a couple of hundred years. And these filthy barbarians from a peninsula off the far left-hand side of the continent, they come roaring out of nowhere. They've just learned how to not shit in their helmets, and all of a sudden they show up with like steam engines and repeating rifles. Holy, where'd they come? Why them? Why these people? And it's a good question. I mean, and it's fascinating. I'm sorry, I'm really far afield, but I have a whole other strain of thought that I'm thinking about on this whole thing. But anyway, let's finish up with Christ.
Oh, well, no, I just want to also point out, I think you're right. Your point about a continuation of Greek thought. I mean, it is significant that these Gospels are written in Greek, and I think it's significant that that if Jaron and Matthew are right, they originate from places that are much closer to Greece than they are to the Levant, and that they really are based on characters like Dionysus. Jesus is like the way less fun version of Dionysus, right? He's turning water into wine, right? And his mother is like, there's no wine at the wedding, and he's like, oh, Mom, here,
You forgot again? Okay, do I have to do this again, Mom?
Again? Yeah. He's like kind of miffed off Dionysus, right? So,
and Asclepius, the pool of Bethesda, they tie that back to
which is
Asclepius,
which is an anachronism. That's a huge clue that John has written around 170, is that there was no Asclepian until Hadrian actually put that there. So that entire story around the healing pool really doesn't make sense in the first century at all, which is, I think, one of the things that really clued them in, that they had to look at that. They had to look at the timing. And so it has these elements of Greek culture really heavily, more than it has any elements from the Torah. It's just kind of bolted on.
It's an exciting fusion. I'll give you another story of exciting fusion. because I think about this a lot, which is a young black guy from Washington State who trains as a paratrooper for the Vietnam War, breaks his ankle. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Vietnam War, breaks his ankle. No.
He's a guitar player.
Leo Kottke?
Leo Kottke's
No.
not black, last time I checked.
Oh, black. I'm sorry. Oh, it's Jimi Hendrix. No, Jimi?
Jimi Hendrix.
No. Who are you talking about? Jimi Hendrix.
About Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was either volunteered or was drafted to the Vietnam War, was trained as a paratrooper, and I think he broke his ankle on an exercise and was discharged from the military. And he played rhythm guitar. Jim's like, oh, I thought we were talking about Christ before.
Wow.
And Jimmy, no, but it's really interesting because I think it's a really important thing that ties together a lot of things we've been talking about, which is he's a blues musician. He plays guitar for James Brown. I think he was a guitarist for James Brown's band.
Mm-hmm. I'd heard that.
And then started doing his thing. And then I think he was discovered by Paul McCartney in New York.
Like everyone.
Well, it's just really interesting. Okay, first off the bat, Jimi Hendrix is the luckiest human being in recorded human history. So Paul McCartney comes to hear him. I think it's Paul McCartney. One of the Beatles hears him in New York and says, "You have to come to England right now. You have to come right now." He arrives in England on the day that John Marshall releases his first amplifier, the first Marshall amp.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, Jimi Hendrix makes friend with a guy who's a former electronics engineer for the British Navy who says, "I'm working on this thing called a phase shifter. You want to check it out?" So you have a black guy from America who's wearing the clothes from Carnaby Street. He's wearing like the psychedelic clothes.
Right.
Playing through a Marshall amp. And he's also
really well, by the way,
an outrageously gifted guitarist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's this amazing it's just all the laser beams focus at exactly and precisely the same time on that person. And all of a sudden he becomes this prism for everything that's been bubbling up in that whole society for a long time. You've got the psychedelic, you got the black, you got the rhythm and blues, you got the Brits involved, you've got electronics, you've got really loud amplifiers, and boy oh boy, you better be behind the defilade when that one goes off, because he is united. He's a synthesis point for all these things that have been looking to mate with each other. And to a certain degree, I think that's another key thing about Christianity, because honestly, with all due respect to Christians, because I do not read the Bible a lot, and I really don't mean to demean anybody's belief. I really don't. I think honestly, a lot of the world is really inexplicable, and human beings are really inexplicable. And a lot of things can't be explained, and science only takes you so far and stuff like that. So it's not a critique, but this is a belief system. I mean, wow, this is not the one I would have picked. But maybe that's because of door number one, there's always door number one. It's the will of God. And you're not meant to appreciate it rationally or on any rational basis. Okay, fine. Door number one. I'm not going to go through that door. Door number two, it's an amazing synthesis that works because it's so fluid and it's so malleable. And it unites the Greek, the sense of Socrates. It unites that with Judaism, but also in its practice, it really drew on the Roman Empire, because there is a pope and there are cardinals and there are dioceses and there are bishops, and it's a very, as a practice, it's a very structured organization.
Well, let me just interject here. I think the mystery is, how did it rise to be the official religion? And there's probably a good history of that. How did it rise to be the official religion of Rome. Once it is the official religion of Rome, you have the full backing of the Roman military, right? And then they go around whacking all the other spin-off cults.
Sure.
Anything that, proclaims to be anything like it but isn't is just gone, right?
Yep.
And it's gone by force. So that's not a mystery. It's just that, like, that phase for the first 300 years. Well, no, 200. It's really fast. Because if all of this comes together in the 2nd century, by the end of the 3rd century,
that's pretty fast for the ancient world.
Middle of the 4th century. What's that?
That's pretty quick for the ancient world. They didn't have like printing presses and modems. I mean, they're like writing shit down on like pigskin and like walking it to their friends. So it's impressive. It's a very impressive thing. And I think the other key thing about it is, it separates, it gets the ethical and the ethnic out of religion. That's the key thing it did to Judaism. You don't have to be a Jew to believe. You can be anybody, which honestly is a Roman thing. See, that's the other thing.
Yes, I'm getting back to my Rome.
You are a citizen of Rome because we say you are, not because you were born in and around the area of Rome or this or that. All you have to do is you have to believe.
Yeah.
Now, I mean,
and there's another element here too, because Socrates he hung out with the nobles. A lot of religion really had to do with the higher levels of society. Right. And here is someone who's born in a non-existent town of Nazareth that is poor and is very much of the common people. And so in that way, it could become wildly popular.
It becomes wildly popular.
The popularity is...
Right. And that lays the foundation for, people would say lays the foundation for the great expansion of the franchise of human rights, which is, okay, slaves and prostitutes, they're in. They can enter the kingdom of
all
heaven.
You people.
Okay.
All you losers who speak Latin and not Greek, right? Yeah, you're all in.
You're all in.
And you can be saved, and there's eternal life, and God loves you.
Right.
And he's not angry. Not angry anymore.
It's not a bad message.
Not bad.
It's a pretty damn good message. And like the Romans did that. It was a franchise empire. It was a franchise, which is, okay, I mean, let's not overlook the fact that the Romans were like everybody else, brutal and violent and unrelenting. But basically they said, look, you're going to build the Colosseum there, and you're going to build the baths here, and we're going to put the road through here. And if you pay the taxes and you don't cause us too much problems, you're in. You're part of the empire. And the empire is very interesting because the whole concept of empire is very interesting. Empires are very loose. And that's a key factor of the Roman empires. They really didn't care too much about religion. They really didn't. They're like, look, as long as you burn shit down, we're okay with whatever you're worshiping. Okay, just don't be dicks about it. And a lot of it was allowed, and Catholicism adopted a lot of that. There is no Santa Claus in the Bible. Jesus was not born on December 25th. And there's no saints in the Bible. There's no saints.
But it is, it's funny. It is, here's a similarity with Santa Claus. Santa Claus was invented by by an advertising agency working for the Coca-Cola company. There was Saint Nicholas and the other one, but there were two different figures that they just combined, and they put the Coca-Cola colors on it, and that way they could sell soda in the winter. But that's similar because, again, it's like, it's
there's still Charles Dickens and a Christmas Carol. There is still Christmas before Coca-Cola. There's Christmas.
There's Saint Nick. There's Saint Nick. Why am I forgetting the other? There are two different. There's Father Christmas and Saint Nick. They're different, but they're not. The Santa that we picture was invented for the Coca-Cola company.
Right, like some other things we've talked about in this conversation. You take this thing and you match it with this thing and you weld them together. And everybody's like, yeah, it's a lot easier. I totally remember one instead of two. You know, it's really interesting. It's like, and it's kind of reassuring because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it does point, I guess, looking at this idea of mythicism, it doesn't exactly point to the folly of human nature, but it really does kick the ground for me, having been raised Catholic and having taken it very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that I asked too many questions and then none of the nuns wanted to answer any of my questions.
Oh, well, nuns are not known
you actually
for their
don't
humor. You're right.
You don't actually have an answer, do you? And that was the beginning of the end for me. But
sure.
the it does feel very groundless, right? I mean, the idea of the existence of Paul and Jesus and all the others, the fishers, the fishermen.
Well, the iconography.
Who heard the word,
Right. And you have the pictures. Because the Catholic Church is really big on pictures. There's pictures everywhere. Yeah. There's Paul. There's Luke. There's Mark. The four symbols: the lion, the bull. Each of the four had their own symbol. I forget which. Mark was the eagle. One was the eagle. One was the. And it's like you. And then it's like
Peter.
We're just. Yeah, we're not too. I wouldn't put too much. I wouldn't put money on that one. And it's like,
well, when you look at this, you realize this is a myth like any other.
Right.
This is a
human
mythological
creation
system like any other.
And in that sense, fan fiction, as long as you bleach out the condescending connotations of that term, it is like fan fiction. It's like
the
people contribute to the idea. It evolves. And people contribute to it, and they make up new variations of it and new extensions of the franchise. I mean, we've seen that so much recently. I mean, it's kind of funny. I'm not equating it with Christianity, God forbid, no pun intended. But, that's what we do today with creative works is so much different than what we used to do with creative works. Now we have prequels. And prequels of prequels, and we have spin-offs, and we have spin-offs of spin-offs. And like the Star Wars empire has expanded. I mean, the total corpus of everything associated with it is monstrous. It goes on forever.
And then a group of people get together and they say, this is canon, this is not canon.
Right.
This has continuity, this doesn't have continuity.
And are they wrong?
It is actually,
Are they wrong?
Right.
It's all one view is that it's all improvisational. It's all situational. It's all improvisational. And what works, works, and what doesn't, doesn't. Sort of like science. It's all observational. And if we observe it, okay. If we don't, we don't. So I applaud what these guys are doing. But it doesn't really change anything, I think. Strangely enough, because I'm fundamentally a religious person.
Yeah, and I would just say that in my experience in terms of, Jaron kind of has his little forum that he holds where he basically says, show me proof for the existence of Jesus and Paul. Or I think he puts up Jesus and Paul that didn't exist, right, is the prompt up on the screen. And it is kind of amazing to hear people kind of call into the show and say, like, they can't even fathom that idea.
Yeah.
Like what? Wait. What do you mean?
That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
I mean, does Treebeard exist?
Well, this is what I was like.
No.
If Gandalf didn't exist, then who killed the Balrog?
Kind of.
That's my proof for Gandalf.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're assuming that people need to have strict, rational, physical reality to back up a belief system. And the answer is nope.
Well,
so interesting. Can I
they don't need it.
Can I veer from a completely different
sure,
drive? Do you have any time? Do you have time to keep talking, or are you like?
Yeah, we're going long, but we're going long, but it's late, and no, we're good.
I can stop.
No. I think I'm going to fix a cocktail for myself though while you talk.
I'll
or you want to wait? You want to wait, and I'll come back.
I'll wait.
All right, but hold on to your thought. Hold on to your thought. I'll be right back.
Okay. Can I sing while you're gone?
You may.
What should I sing?
I can actually. I have.
What
You can keep talking. I have Bluetooth on, and I can talk to you from the kitchen. I'll yell.
I've got red roses for a blue lady. Oh, and he's back already. Oh, he's okay. Now we're
cooking with gas.
Round 2. Skull, baby. Knock yourself out.
Highland Park Limited.
So this may sound completely unrelated, but I think it's interestingly related, which is I stumbled upon this guy on YouTube, the source of all wisdom, this guy talking about his book. And I've heard about this book before. It's called The Musical Human by Michael Spitzer, 2021. And before I get into The Musical Human, he very clearly says, I was greatly influenced by Sapiens, the book by Yuval Noah Harari. Which,
we talked about it.
And I think Yuval Noah Harari tipped his hat to Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, which is 1997. So you got Guns, Germs, and Steel, 97, Harari Sapiens, which is 2011, and then The Musical Human, 2021. It's fascinating because what I did is I went back and I started rereading Sapiens. And I got to tell you something. Yuval Harari can fucking write in a sentence. I'm telling you, he is such a good writer. I don't necessarily agree with all of his ideas, but I sent you some stuff that he wrote for the New York Times about AI.
Yes.
Like AI doesn't need agency; it just needs to tell us the right story, and we'll do whatever AI says. Which I think is one of the most
has become even clearer with this conversation. Yeah.
It's some of the most beautiful, like 6 sentences in the history of human communication. I keep rereading those over and over again because he's absolutely right. So, what they talk about, so The Musical Human is interesting because it's this guy trying to really dive into what's special about humans and music. Like, what is music and where does it come from and what does it mean? And honestly, listen, this guy does not give a good interview because he becomes incredibly hand-wavy really early on. And just like Yuval Harari, they extrapolate a lot of things from paleontological evidence that is really meager. And that makes me very, very suspicious. But it's interesting. Because music is interesting. Music, and it's something I'd like to explore more with you. Because music is a curious thing. It's a very curious thing. Like you said, it's about rhythm. And rhythm is a curious thing. And one thing I heard one person say is that humans are the only creatures that do synchronized movements. Like dance or drill, like everybody doing the exact same movement at the same time according to a beat. They said no other animal does that. Now maybe that's untrue.
Whoa, no, hang on. Birds do that.
No, they don't.
They don't? Don't fish swim in schools? Don't birds fly in flocks?
Yes, that's flocking algorithms. I don't think that counts.
Okay, different.
I don't know. Maybe it's the same. Maybe I'm full of shit. But I think it's an interesting thing.
Counter example,
But it's very interesting because that ties into something, another book that I really loved from when I took at Haverford, which was The Will to Power by Kennedy, which is a story, a Western European historian's history of the interplay between government and technological military development from the beginning of time, but he really gets into his stride like the 1400s, 1500s, and 1600s. And one of the things he really focuses on and which is the cover picture for the book, is the Duke of Nassau, the Duke of Orange of Nassau in the Netherlands, develops the concept of drill, which we sort of take for granted, but it didn't exist at one point. And he invents drill, the idea that soldiers spend hours a day doing these choreographed things en masse. They go out there and they go out into a ground. They go through these motions again and again and again, almost like a ballet. And
when did he live? What was?
That's the Duke of Nassau.
When did he invent this?
Well, let's find out.
It's hard to imagine an army that doesn't drill, is what I'm saying. But
no, it's not hard.
Right,
not hard to imagine at all.
Right.
Because up until 1400, they were all professional armies. They were all they were all like Blackwater. They were all hired armies.
Right. Well, that was the book, The Devil's Broker, that we read about Hawkwood in the 100 Years' War. If you imagine the battle at Agincourt, it was just every man for themselves. There wasn't, although the archers, were regimented.
They're kind of cool. They were boss. Let me see. Duke of Nassau. Maurice, Prince of Orange. The invention of modern drill is primarily credited to the Dutch House of Orange-Nassau in the 16th and 17th centuries. Prince Maurice of Orange. And so what Kennedy, the historian, focuses on is the thing about drill is that it's very primal. This idea of you and 200 other guys doing the exact same movements in perfect synchronization.
Right.
And that it builds something.
It's similar though to the Romans wall, right? I mean, that's the phalanx.
Watch your mouth.
In Greece.
You kiss your mother with the same mouth. You get a little bit of scotch in you, and it's just the wheels come up.
Talking about
fucking
phalanx.
Wagon around.
I'm telling you.
We're talking about phalanxes, everybody. Hang on to your hats.
But you're right. The drill, the
drill's
marching
different than
in
a phalanx.
They're not.
Drill's different than testudo.
Yeah, it's different.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
It's not something that you do as a battle mechanism. It's something. It's an actual performance in rhythm with other people. And what Kennedy says is that it taps into something really deep with human beings. That it really is something fundamentally deep, and it ties you to the other people, and it's the bonds that are created by that. Now, maybe it's full of crap, and it's all just made up in the minds of some historian hanging out somewhere in an ivory tower somewhere. But music is interesting because it is about rhythm fundamentally. It's about periodic phenomenon because white noise is not music. It may be musical, but it's not music. And I sent you that whole stuff about the Michael Tilson Thomas videos. You really should. I really would appreciate if you'd watch one of those at some point in your life.
I got caught up in rereading Jaron and Matthew's book, but I will look at that.
That's fine. But if you tell me that you can watch because you watch more Stargate, I swear to Christ, I will come out there and pile drive you wherever you are.
I am. Last night, I did I'm part of a songwriting group called the March of Ides, because we meet on the Ides of each month, and there's 4 of us: David Goldfinger, Diane Ziegler, Dave Crossland, and myself, and we have to bring a new song. And Dave last night said, "You know what show you would really enjoy seeing?" And I had forgotten that you had suggested it before. Yeah. So what I've been watching is Patriot. And I find it incredibly dark and incredibly funny and so dry. Like, I can imagine how this show would have flopped because people might not have understood that there was any humor in it at all.
Oh, but there's an enormous amount.
Incredibly funny. Incredibly funny.
So, it really is. So we're talking about Patriot.
Right, which is an Amazon Prime. It came out in 2017.
Yeah, it came out a bunch of years ago, but I watched when it first came out. And that first episode where he's in that park in Amsterdam and starts singing the folk song about his life, I think is one of the most magnificent pieces of TV. He is so good. It is so ridiculously funny.
Yes.
And then it jump cuts to his father having a discussion with like Condoleezza Rice, like his father's like the head of the CIA. And he's talking to Condoleezza Rice, and she says, and it's just a great card because she goes, "Are the Iranians going to get the bomb?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, in about 6 months, they'll have it. Yeah, so we got to move on this one. We
got to move now."
It's so funny, but other times it really comes off like it has the same reek that Severance had, and Severance really turned me off. Like I didn't dig Severance in any way whatsoever, because at some point it just starts to suffocate sometimes on its own, sort of like dope fueled hipsterism. It's too clever by half. And it gets a little too angular and a little too anarchic. And I think people are just trying to be really clever and really funny, or they're really bouncing wild ideas. It's like, you need, it was very uneven, but it's definitely worth. And the whole thing, he goes to work for the pipe company. And I don't know if you've gotten to that part.
I love the actors. Yeah, I have. I actually started at the end of season 1 by accident. And there's a wonderful line in it where, so he's working for the CIA, doing horrible things for the CIA that are really having a terrible effect on him. And he's a songwriter. He's a singer-songwriter. So when he finds himself like he has a little time somewhere, he goes to an open mic and he plays his songs, which are basically confessions. Right. It's like, I think his brother is there at one of them and like comes up on stage and stops him from singing about how he like, if you happen to show up, if somebody happened to take a big bag that might have contained like some money in it, and you happen to follow them back to their place, and their brothers all seem to know jujitsu, and you stab them, his brother's like, we gotta go. We got to leave.
Everybody.
You could
good night.
They said like you could see how that might be understandable or something like this part. And he's singing all of this really well. But I love the one line. He's talking to an artist that he's meeting on the street, and she knows him as a musician because he put out some albums. She goes, "I love your music." He goes, "Oh, thanks." He goes, "Shouldn't you be like having a more like relaxed lifestyle that you have to be somewhere?" He goes, "No, I'm not really a musician. My father talked to me, when I was really young, and he said it was kind of a hard life."
Yeah.
And he's like flying around whacking people, and his life is a living hell. And he's like, "My father told me it would be a hard life to be a musician."
No, it's really, but then
I really like it so far.
Oh yeah, no, but you got to plow. You'll find that and I think it gets thinner on the ground as time goes on. I think they sort of ran out of ideas at some point.
Early episodes are great though, really.
But that first episode is fab. That first episode, they come out swinging. It's very, very funny. But getting back to Jared Diamond and Musical Mind, I mean, Yuval Harari, his basic thesis is the importance of language, because he doesn't really start there. What he says the importance is that we can believe in fictions. And he's really good at explaining it. He says, what's the difference between the shaman waving his hands over the campfire and the attorney filing a certificate of incorporation? He said, there's none. He said, because a corporation doesn't exist. It has no physical existence. It's just a story. It's written down on a piece of paper.
Right.
The power of the story. And this ties into all the stuff that you love, which is that money is just a shared hallucination, which is true. But there's a lot of shared hallucinations. In fact, everything's a shared hallucination. And a lot of things we talk about don't have any physical existence, like love and trust and things that really, or religion. They have no physical manifestation at all. They're just stories in our heads that we tell each
maybe
other.
Matter. Maybe physical existence doesn't have a, going back to our friend Bernardo Castro. But well, no, you're right. I mean, absolutely.
Don't trigger me like that.
Don't even. I know.
Don't even.
Don't bring him up. Don't. So it's the scotch. I'm sorry. Jimmy's a little happy right now.
So, but the whole point is that underlying Harari's statement, the whole point of that thing is you need to have language. Language is the key to telling these stories. Harari's key thesis is humans have survived and conquered the planet because they can organize themselves in enormous numbers based upon shared fictions. They can tell stories. But underneath that, and it's part of this whole statement about AI, is language. Language is the weapon. Not the weapon. Well, it's sort of like a rival. A weapon, it's the tool. Language is the tool whereby you achieve all these things. And so language is very interesting. One of the things that Spitzer says in The Musical Human is that music arose because after we developed language and after we developed speech the way we did, we had far more sounds than we needed. Which is an interesting, I think it's total bullshit, but at least it's an interesting idea. It's a clever idea.
Yeah, right.
Which is that we're making, he says, if you look at most animals, yeah, they can make sounds, they can communicate, but they usually only have a vocabulary of like 4 to 20 sounds. Right. He says with humans, we can make all kinds of sounds, far in excess of what we need.
It's our huge craniums and our tiny jaws.
Yeah. There's all the physiological explanations which are frankly quite boring. But the fundamental fact of the matter is that the huge brains are important because an enormous amount of the brain is spent on two things in the body: the thumb and the tongue.
Right.
Those two things actually, significant parts of the brain are focused on those two things: the tongue and the thumb. And so, obviously, music is related to rhythm because it's really essential to music is the beat, the periodicity. Yes, you can have sort of an aperiodic melody. Yes, you can, but not for long.
Yeah.
And not always, and not alone.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you have to have a metronomic 16th note beat all the time, but there has to be, and that's the thing is that what he talks about, it might be interesting to listen to this guy talk, because I think a lot of what he's saying is really very poorly worded and he throws out a lot of interesting concepts along the way. Maybe he just needs some help. And one of the things he talks about is, it's about time. Because music is an art form that exists in time, unlike many other art forms. It has no permanent existence, and it's really about the past, the present, the future. And what you're doing is you're anticipating what's coming next, which you can't do with a painting or a sculpture,
right,
or architecture. Well, you can with architecture because you walk through a building, so there is a sense of progression.
But usually, there's a rhythm to architecture. I mean, there's absolutely a rhythm to architecture.
Mm-hmm.
I'll state that. Yeah.
Because
what is the name of the author again, or the book again? I'm getting lost because there's 3 different books you talked about.
This one is Human by Michael
The Musical Human.
Spitzer.
Cool.
But there's an interview with him. I'll send you the link with the interview. I think the interview is kind of like it's not the best interview I've ever heard in my life.
Okay.
His heart's in the right place, and I think he's spinning off a lot of ideas. And I think if you're coming to him for the final product, you're going to be disappointed. But he might trigger some ideas. I think it's I think it's still a very undiscovered country in a very rich field, which is why music? And what does it all mean? It's such an evanescent thing. It's such an insubstantial thing. It doesn't mean anything. It is the most meaningless thing in the world. Music.
Interesting. I would say the meaning. So speaking from somebody who does some meditation and teaches meditation and talks about meditation, I think one of the problems we have as sentient creatures is the problem of time. We imagine time expanding out in front of us. Well, in the West we do, and then preceding us, behind us, sort of gathering behind us. And here we are now. And that's the conception, right? That's a conception of time. We really only have an experience of a very relative now that isn't shared with anything else in the universe. Every other now in the universe is in the past, um, and also kind of separated by space. And so, just coming to terms with this notion of time, which we cannot seem to live outside of, at least in the way that we imagine it. We could be going backwards into the future and we could be looking at the past. That might be more accurate, but it doesn't, even that doesn't really fully explain our existence in time. And music creates a space in which we live in a greater time, because there's four on the floor, the kick drum's going, the snare is going to be there the next time. We know that snare is coming. If the snare doesn't come, we get upset, right? It is a way for us to be in time with what we perceive is the universe's
right. But we rapidly tire of things that are completely predictable. That's the beauty of music, is that it has to be predictable,
but not too.
But predictability is not enough.
Right.
And that's interesting because the guy that I wanted you to watch, which is Michael Tilson Thomas, his big phrase, and what he would say to his orchestras, he says, what I'm trying to get to is where now is. That's what we're trying to get to, where now is.
Right.
And that's, in fact, there's a documentary done about him that has that title, Where Now Is, Michael Tilson Thomas. I haven't watched it yet.
Wow.
I'll probably watch it. But there's a lot of things floating in the water here that I'm very excited about. Tilson Thomas has a lot of interesting things to say. For example, I think I sent you. I'm almost done. I'll get off because I know this is going on way too long. This may actually be a double.
It's a long episode, but I've enjoyed it. I think it's
or maybe
good.
We split up into two parts, 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we'll just.
What's interesting is that it's funny, and it's all these different neurons firing. But so I think I sent you the link to the Tilson Thomas episode about the Rite of Spring. But the more interesting one, that I'll send you that one. I think the Rite of Spring one is great. I hate the Rite of, I don't like the Rite of Spring music, but it's a fascinating historical event. It's really Stravinsky, Nijinsky, and Ballet Russe and all that stuff. It's just a fabulous story, fascinating story about, again, about a person who, how many times musical genius occurs because of a meeting of key people at a key point in time. If there hadn't been Ballet Russe, and of course the guy's name just flew out of my head, the guy who ran Ballet Russe, who's absolutely famous. But if it wasn't for Ballet Russe, if it wasn't for Nijinsky, we probably wouldn't know who Stravinsky is. And if it wasn't for Stravinsky, we probably wouldn't know who Nijinsky and the guy who ran Ballet Russe. I mean, it's that meeting of those three people, and certainly the meeting between the Ballet Russe guy and Stravinsky that turned into this huge thing. It's the combination that creates something that was 100 times greater, much in the same way that Jimi Hendrix was the collision of the birth of psychedelia on Carnaby Street in London, and John Marshall making really loud fucking amps, and a guy making a bass shifter, and he's bringing the blues from America, and all of a sudden there's just like this fusion reaction that explodes and illuminates everything. The other episode that Tilson, another episode he did was for Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. And that episode of keeping score is much more about the actual business of putting on a symphony orchestra presentation, a production. And he really goes in depth, and it's really kind of nerve-wracking. He really counts down the minutes to the point where all the musicians are tuning up, and everybody's handing out the people are being shown to their seats, and the lights are being mounted and stuff like that. And all the people sit down, they tune up, And they go minute by minute down to launch. And then it's that moment where he's standing there in the green room waiting to be called on stage, the conductor. And they follow him and he walks out there and he says, "This is the hardest part of conducting. When I walk out there, because I have to turn to the audience and greet them as one person. And then I have to turn around and greet the orchestra as a different person." And he says the hardest part. And I thought, and the first part of my mind said, what the fuck? I would think the hardest part would be all those little markings on the page, like moving your hand up and down to make sure you don't fuck up. Maybe that's like kind of hard.
Not pointing to the tuba when you mean the timpani. Right, exactly.
That's an E.
What?
Sorry. My bad.
Sorry. Yeah. Not dropping the baton, right?
When the tempo 18. Changes. I thought we were on measure 8.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, but all joking aside.
You. No. Oh, I'm sorry. You. Fuck. And you're waving it. Yeah.
I've seen that happen. By the way, I've seen that happen one time.
You were working in the opera company, yeah.
No, it wasn't the opera company. It was an ensemble in Philadelphia. But I saw a conductor stop the entire ensemble, and like only about 4 bars in, but they stopped the ensemble, and they said, "We're going to take it from the top. We're going to do it over again." I was like, "Ooh, somebody's in trouble." But getting back to our main point, it's really interesting. Tilson Thomas says, "I have to greet the audience as one person, and then I have to turn around and face the orchestra and be a different person. And that's the hardest part." There's something deep in that. I'm still mining it. But there's something deep in that. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And I'm sort of running out of gas a little bit. But I'm just fascinated by music. I'm fascinated by this idea of we make things up. We talk about the New Testament. Music is made up. Kinds of creative things are made up. And then the importance of other people pouring their energy into the things that we've made up. We've talked about that many times, which is that to be a great artist, you have to have a great audience.
Yep.
You have, and not just an audience, not just the people sitting in chairs listening to you, but the people who are willing to like repost your performances and write record reviews about you, and the people who will come along and write summaries, the greatest, the 10 greatest albums of 2026, and they're going to put your album on there. I mean, it's a whole army of people, and to a certain degree, and we've talked about Gary Newman, the joke about how he wrote a song and somebody completely misinterpreted what the lyrics meant. He says, that's fine. That's okay, because that's what you think. And it goes into this whole thing that we've talked about before, you and I, about how much is really the music and how much is everything that it triggers in your mind and all the associations that.
Sorry.
That wasn't Jim farting, by the way, FYI.
It was a mic drop, an unintentional mic drop there.
Yeah, it's a mic drop. And so it's really, it's about humans and communication and how we make meaning out of things. And it really ties to Yuval Harari because we have these shared myths. And we build these things that are built on nothing. Absolutely nothing. We build religions, we build symphonies, we build corporations. They don't exist. They don't exist. Music is just a couple of marks on a page. Religion is a couple of books. But that's not what religion is, and that's not what belief is, and that's not what musical joy is.
To sum this up a little bit, is the endeavor, especially when we're talking about, and where it really goes to where the work of Jaron and Matthew may be very threatening, is that we really seek permanence in a world that, as we discover it more and more, is impermanent.
Well, the problem is when you seek an absolute, when you seek an absolute justification for why you find something beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's Beethoven and he's just the greatest and stuff like that. And another answer is no, he's not. He's a fairly good composer. He just had a lot of people who liked his shit and a lot of people who wrote stories about him and a lot of people who performed his works. And maybe he was just lucky. And maybe the other guy who would have been a lot better than him got a cold that day and never showed up to the rehearsal. But that doesn't invalidate it. That doesn't mean that it's all wrong. And that's why what the guys do with the guys do with the analysis of the New Testament, I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to change anybody's minds about anything. And I think it's important to do because I think not because you want to change people, but because you want to say you believe because you believe. Maybe you should be aware.
The stories have meaning.
The stories have meaning.
The stories have meaning.
But don't rely upon them. Don't come to them for objective, rational truth. Not objective, rational, but because you think that there's a guy called Luke who wrote them, because it probably didn't work out that way, and that's not rare. That happens all the time. Stuff is constantly being edited and rewritten. I mean, like in our study of Buddhism, I mean, God, who knows? Nobody even pretends. I mean, they just sort of throw up their hands and say, yeah, there's this sutra of this and sutra of that, but who knows where they came from?
Sutra was found, or it was dug up, or it was made up. I mean, yeah. No, and that was a very challenging book for me. So that really went to the mythicism in my own faith. So, yeah, but I think it's an absolute good to question these things. I think it's good to look at things critically and take on the hard questions and not shy away from them because you think something is absolute or should be or is permanent, or is something outside of this evolving story that we're telling.
I hope so, because sometimes it's sort of a buzzkill.
How do you mean?
But now, but then again, the other side of that coin is sometimes religions get a little aggressive. And they say, you better toe the line, or else.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're more like, well, that book that you keep talking about, that was like made up by like a checkout clerk in Des Moines. It's like,
a con man from Turkey. Yeah.
That doesn't ingratiate.
Well, listen, Marcion wasn't a con man, but he was the other guy, Pellegrini. That's
Peregrinus.
Peregrinus. That's the guy,
or something like that. I forget the other guy.
That's the guy.
What was this? I got to do it before we end this freaking podcast because I got to
find out who he is. Saint Ignatius, right? Saint Ignatius.
Peregrinus.
But
nobody's coming up.
I think you have to look at the actual source in the book. I did send you the.
Proteus.
I sent you the
Peregrinus Proteus. 95 to 165 AD, was a Greek Cynic philosopher from Parium. Early Christian community in Palestine. He ended up a Cynic.
All of the findings and resources are on a website called mythicism.web.app. If you want to look that up. Christ Before Jesus is by Jaron Wingo and Matthew Britt. You can find them on YouTube talking about this stuff, but you're probably more likely to find them on TikTok if you happen to be on TikTok. I think there's a Discord for them. There's kind of a whole mythicism community. There are a lot of theologians who think they're full of shit. Mm-hmm. They think a lot of theologians are full of shit. It's an ongoing debate.
It's an ongoing exchange of values. Yeah, yes. Sergei Diaghilev. Dung flinging. Sergei Diaghilev was the man who led the Ballet Russe, and he's the absolute. It's this unique conjunction of talent in 1910 between Igor Stravinsky, Sergei Diaghilev, and Vaslav Nijinsky, who came together. And Could each of them have been famous without the other? Possibly. But with each other, they created the defining cultural event that people will never stop talking about, which was like 3 seasons of the Ballet Russe that are epic making. Basically, Stravinsky's, the first one was Stravinsky's Firebird, the second one was Rite of Spring, and the third one was Petrushka. They're all great works of art. My personal favorites are Firebird and Petrushka. I sent you I think I sent you, I forget which one I sent you.
I'll check out the first 2, and you can send me more. I should be better at that.
Just one. Just one. That's fine. But I want you to get hip to Michael Tilson Thomas, because I think he's doing something really important, because he's a really accomplished guy. He's a really accomplished conductor, and he really connects with people. He's like the real deal Bernstein, to me, is what he is. He's like Leonard Bernstein without several layers of annoyance. He's the real deal. And the episodes are kind of boring a little bit, but that's because he's really trying to connect with, again, that whole thing about I connect with the audience, then I connect with the musicians. And he's a fierce talent. And he's really trying to like talk to you, even though he's at the level of a Toscanini or at the level of, a major famous conductors. He's really trying to talk to you. Really interesting. I think he's an important person. But anyway, I'll stop there. Enough for now. Let's cut the tape there.
Oh, yes. Got to land this thing. That was fun.
That's 2 episodes. We can break this up into part 1 and part 2.
All right. All right. We'll find something new to talk about. We can talk about that offline. And have a good evening.
You too.
Funny Not Funny is produced by Jim Infantino at Slab Media in Boston. Jim Infantino and Lionel Casson are the co-hosts. Our website is funnynotfunny.net. The theme music is from the song Wheel from the album Utopia Revisited by Jim. The opinions presented by the co-hosts are ridiculous and should not be taken seriously by anyone. Our intended audience is literally nobody. If you're listening to this podcast, you should probably pause to reflect on other choices you've recently made. Please do not subscribe or leave a rating or review. It only encourages us to make more. Thanks for listening.